Small Tales from the Himalayan highlands by Dan Browne. The Invisible Witch. Nirmala was meandering through the old forest when she found the small abandoned village. She had never seen it before, even though she spent much of her time wandering around the ancient woodland, eating wild fruit and talking to the trees. There was just one main paved footpath up the centre of 2 rows of dwellings. Hardly a village at all. That evening she told her mother about her discovery. "Mama, I found a new village deep in the forest." Her mother was furious. "I've told you 1,000 times not to be wandering alone in the forest. Anything could happen. There are evil spirits and wild animals, deep rivers, snakes and spiders. Why can't you be like other girls and play in the town square and stay safe?" she asked. "The girls are so boring, Mum. All they want to do is talk about dolls and clothes, and they never want to go on an adventure." "And what about your friend Jiran, the village elder's son? You used to play with him a lot," she asked. That was a difficult question. What, indeed, about Jiran? He had been her friend. They had been inseparable, and had explored the forest around the hills as children together. But things had changed recently. It was because of his family. Jiran's grandmother had berated him for playing with the Shudra girl. That was her caste. It was the lowest caste, that of the worker. Jiran came from a long line of Ranjanis, the ruling caste of administrators and leaders. His father had clipped him around his ear and told him he would never attract a decent wife if he spent his days running barefoot through the trees with a Shudra girl. And slowly, like a stream in the hot summer, their friendship had dried up, and Nirmala wandered the woods alone. "You are not to go to that village again. It is haunted by an evil spirit. That's why the people of this village moved from there many years ago," said her mother. "What? The people of this village used to live there in the woods?" she asked. "Yes. When this area was first established many years ago by the descendants of your friend Jiran, it was that village where everyone lived," she said. "And why did the village move, Mama?" And her mother told her the tale. There was a young woman, some said a healer, others said a witch, that lived in the village and used to make potions and lotions for sick people and animals. The grandfather of Jiran was the village leader, and he had 2 sons. One of them, Jiran's father. The other one, the older one, would have been his uncle. The firstborn son, Jamal, became ill, and his parents went to the healer. She nursed the boy, gave him potions, and sat by his bed for 12 days and 12 nights. But in the end, she lost the battle with death, and the little soul went back to nature. The boy's mother, Jiran's grandmother, was inconsolable. She blamed the healer for his death. She incited the other women of the village against her. She berated her husband for letting a witch kill their son, and whipped the village up into a frenzy. She gathered the other women, and together they made their own spell. A spell to banish the healer from the village. A spell that she would never be seen again by them. And it worked. The next day, the healer was gone. There was no sign of her. Her house was abandoned. But strange things began to happen. The path in front of her house would be still swept every morning. The doors of the house would sometimes be open and sometimes closed. There was a strange presence in the village that everyone could feel and no one would admit. Soon the headman of the village decided that a new location for everybody, a little further up the valley, would be better. He made the argument that the river was closer, the sunshine hours longer, and the location was closer to other villages. But everyone knew, and no one said, that the spirit of the witch that lingered there was the real reason. And so the village moved, and we have been here since. And no one goes to that abandoned village, and neither should you, she said, ruffling her hair. Nirmala tried not to go back to the abandoned village. She tried very hard, as she was a good girl and always wanted to obey her mother. But it just seemed to keep appearing in front of her, almost by accident, as she explored the forest. Thirsty one day and aware that there was a fresh brook running over cool stones in the abandoned street, she reasoned that her mother could not rebuke her for quenching her thirst, and so she went into the little village. As she drank from the stream, a funny thing happened. The doors of one of the houses opened out onto the street, and on them hung 2 large and pungent fresh sprigs of lavender. There are few smells as potent and calming as fresh Himalayan lavender, and it was a favourite of Nirmala's. Drawn as if in a spell, she walked up to the door and inhaled the deep scent. They were fresh. They had been expertly tied. Someone had put them there. She peeked inside. It was a large kitchen-type room, with many more pots and pans than a normal kitchen. To the side of the stove there was a larger sprig of lavender, some rosemary, and another herb she didn't recognize. She drew closer and saw a glass jar with the liquid in it, and on it, in perfect Sanskrit, the words for healing sleep. She smelled the rosemary and lavender and the strange something else that was in the jar. It was intoxicating. Her mother had notoriously poor sleep, owing to a pair of aging hips that gave her pain whichever way she slept. Without thinking more than this single thought, Nirmala took another, smaller jar, siphoned off some little bit of the liquid, and ran off home with it. That night, she dribbled a few drops onto her mother's pillow before going to sleep. The next morning, she was late to rise, but was still awake before her mother, which was most unusual. Suddenly, she was worried. She had done something bad to her dear mother by putting those drops on her pillow. She raced to her room only to find her sitting calmly and very happily in bed, beaming the most relaxed smile. "Oh, my dear Nirmala, what a wonderful sleep I've had. I haven't slept like that in years. My hips feel rested, my body feels relaxed. What a wonderful day," she said, popping out of bed with an uncommon vitality. From that day on, Nirmala went to the witch's village every day, for that was how she thought of it now. And every day, a new herb would hang on the door, a new bundle would be on the worktop, and a new elixir in the glass vial with its purpose neatly inscribed. There was a lightness and peace in the house, and she would spend more and more time there. Leafing through the books she found, she learned the quantities and temperatures for making the brews. At home she made the lavender and rosemary remedy for her mother, who shared it with the other women of the village. After a year, she had a small arsenal of cures she was confident in making and dispensing, and her mother wondered at her daughter and laughed at how all those years wandering the forest had now not gone to waste. A child with a persistent weaving coughs was brought to her by an anxious mother. An elderly man whose hands had seized with arthritis asked her if there was anything she could do, and a young woman with terrible menstrual pain sought her out to seek relief. Quietly, she helped each one. She took no payment, she just helped. Over the next 2 years, her acceptance as a skilled healer was established within the village. She was 16 when the sickness arrived in the town. No one noticed at first when an old farmer with a bad cough seemed to splutter himself out of life and die. When his sister that he had lived with died the same way a week later, people said it was pneumonia from their damp house. It was when the younger people started to die. That's when the alarm went up and the panic began. A meeting was held. A doctor was sent for, but that might take a while in this remote village. Jiran's father said people should not congregate, and so the village doors were barred and bolted, and people stayed home, hoping not to hear the sound of the dreaded cough. But each morning, someone had succumbed. Some body was left out on the street for the cartmen to collect. The sound of crying and wailing would haunt the village. Coughing and crying, they became the only sounds of that desolate village. So it was unusual that there was a knock on her door late one evening. Jiran's grandmother was standing in the street. "Nirmala, I've come to ask for your help. Jiran is sick with the cough, and my son will not tend him, saying the boy must fight like the rest of us for his life. I know you are a healer, and I know you are his friend. Will you not come and tend to your childhood friend? After all, you are Shudra. It is your karma to serve," she said. Nirmala said she would come in the morning and do all that she could. She slipped out of the house and ran to the forest and spent the full night in the witch's kitchen poring over the books and the use of the herbs. The next day, armed with freshly picked flowers of the forest dawn, she arrived on the doorstep of the village leader's house and was admitted by the grandmother. She was brought to the bed of her childhood friend and noticed that in her absence he had become a man, a handsome young man, and now a very sick young man. He was coughing, red-faced, unable to breathe, but so lethargic it was like all he was that cough. She bathed his forehead with a calming sandalwood balm. She applied crushed chili and aniseed paste to his chest. She burned sage in the room and moved his feet and hands to promote the circulation of his body. She never left his bedside until the night, and then she went back to the abandoned village and read more from the books that had been left out for her. Each day, more and more people got sick, and people came seeking her, but she would not leave the bedside of Jiran, except to run back to her books and the forest for knowledge and herbs. For 11 days she nursed him, and on the 12th day she brought a new remedy she had read from the night before. It was a heady mixture of distilled orange blossom mixed with a paste of nectar from 3 different plants and the essence of apple seed. She covered his entire body in the paste from head to toe and fell herself into a deep sleep, her first in many nights. The next morning she was awoken by the dark and loving eyes of her friend, looking at her with a kindness and awe she had never seen before. Jiran stood over her, stroked her hair, and said, "You have saved me. You have saved my life with your love and your wisdom. My darling Nirmala, the spell you have cast on me is stronger than your medicine. You have made me fall in love," he said, and he kissed her gently on the cheek. As soon as he was recovered, they went together to the woods, and she instructed him on what to pick. They arrived back to the village elder's house laden down with orange blossom and apples and flowers for their nectar. They cooked and brewed and mashed together to make enough paste for all the village, and that evening they called everyone into the square and pasted them all with the healing salve. And everyone was saved. Jiran's grandmother came to her that night as the townspeople celebrated their saving. "I have seen that paste before. It was made by the witch for my son, but he died. I cursed her for his death, but I see now that she had done all she could, and I and the other women damned a good woman of our village. Tell me, Nirmala, how shall I repent?" The next morning, Nirmala brought the grandmother and the women of the village to the old abandoned street and the witch's house. She had them move all the books and jars and potions and pans and bring them back to the village elder's house, which had the largest kitchen in the village. Standing on the square, she told all in the village, "This house will now become a school of learning, so that we may never forget the medicines of nature." And so it was, and the fame of Nirmala's herbal kitchen and the knowledge of her students became famous throughout the whole Himalaya. And the forest grew up and over the old abandoned village that finally seemed at peace.